Okay, good morning. So we're up to Siman Kuf Nun Ches Sif Hey. Kuf Nun Ches Sif Hey. Says the Mechaba. Hanoitz el Yod of Lepeiros. If someone washes his hands, Netiras Adayim Lepeiros, Harizeh Megasya Ruach. That's considered arrogant. For Davke Shanoitl Materas Chiyuv. That's only if he does it because he feels it's absolute chiyuv to do it, which we said is not. Avlim Noitla Mishum Nekius, just because of cleanliness, Shelo Yod of Nekius, because his hands were not clean, that will be mutar. Ubosot Sli Yesh Mishaniraj Midvara Vafapi Shem Moihal Tefech Olov Dinner Kaperis. There's who say with meat, if the liquid is coming out of the meat, that's got a din of Paris, and therefore that could make it requiring Netiras Yadayim. The Tavshel Mechitim Heim Genuvim Dinner Kaperis, and Tavshel, a cooked stew with chitim, Vehe Neguvim, they're dry, Dinner Kaperis. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Berurah, see what this means. Harizeh Megasya Ruach. So someone who washes his hands for fruit is considered Megasya Ruach. Zok the Mishnah Berurah Chaf Beis Megasya Ruach Shemare Ba'atzma Shu Medakdik B'mitzvahs. He's showing these very, very particular mitzvahs Masha Ein Tzorach, where it's not really necessary. The Medina Lo Tignu Klam Netiras Yadayim Leperes, because with Ikar Din they were never misaken it. So Commissioner Ksavna B'Sif Cotton Base Ein Sham. V'Dama da also B'Toras Chiyuv. When it says it's also when you do it B'Toras Chiyuv, Hu Afilu Im Lo Yivarech Al Netiras, even if you don't make a bracha, it's still caught by this. Kivin Shenoitli Mishum Mitzvah Netilas, because you are doing it L'Shum Mitzvah. Shelo Hoyu Yadav Nekiyas Ein Bachreinim Sheskimu Da'afilu Men Yodeh Lohem Shum Lichluch V'Tumah. Even if you're not sure, Rak Sheroitz Lahachme Alaz V'Nitzil Yadav Mishum Kvod HaBracha, Gamkein Muta, that would actually be okay. V'Hodanokot Haramah V'Lo Hoyadav Nekiyas, your hands are not clean. Lashmim Da'afilu Ba'ifin Zeh Bevadai Tzorech Medin L'Lichot Yadav Mishum HaBracha. Mikol Makom Ein Little Derech Chiyuv Netilah. Not that you have a chiyuv to wash your hands. Rak Derech Chitza Bama. That's how you should do it. Okay, Yesh Mishanira. This is going on the moichal, which comes out of meat. Yesh Mishanira. Kosvu ha'achreinim. Chavtalet. Tukula alma moedim bezed the moel hayetz min abosar lechoshiv mashka. Just the natural liquids that come out of meat, they're not called properly a mashke. Ach in mashke tefech mimayim she'olov. If it's, however, liquid that it comes from water that was poured on the meat, that you rinse the meat before you cook it, before you roast it, pshita de nikra mashke, then for sure that would be considered mashke. It's just that when you cook it, it's not tefech mimayim. That's not how tzli works. Shemis yabish be'isliya, because tzli has the effect that it contracts the meat, not that it makes it brings out all the liquids. But that's hagra. Im hudach b'mayim kodim hatzliya, if it was rinsed in water before the tzli, oz gamkein al hamoy agam al hamoy al hayetz me'abosa yesh shem mashke. Then it has got the status of mashke. It was dry from the liquid that came out. Because if it was wet from the rotav, then it would need netilah, like we discussed. Dinner kaperes v'achreinim iskimu demine tafshil, the cooked foods and things like that. Given she'ein derech liga b'yad, you're not going to eat it with your hands. Ela le'echol b'kaf ein tzorech netilas yadayim. You don't need netilas yadayim for that. V'afilim nogeh b'kederech mikre b'teich hakaf. Even if you happen to touch it because your hand touched the thing on the spoon or the fork, gamkein ein tzorech netilah, it would not really require a netilah. V'chein nagin avul mashe derech liga b'yadav. But when we do touch things with our hands, afal pisha eichel b'kli, then lo mahani. Peres hamavushalim b'mayim. Fruit which is cooked in water. Yesh deis ben achreinim im strichen netilas yadayim. If this is caught by this halacha, I think one or two mentioned it after yesterday with this thing, and also pickles and things like that. It's coming up. Falkein nochen lahachmin laochlin al dekavim yesh mashke tefech aleihem. If the water is still wet, dripping off it, then use a fork or something which, or a spoon that will not require netilah. Uchavushim kagoin ugakus. The pickles and things like that. But little yadayim, then it's preferable to unless they're dry. Once they're dry, then you're okay. Someone who eats cake, so you got a bit of a bit of cake and you dip it into a l'chaim or a liquor or something. That's not called a dover shetibul b'mashka. Mishum de zeyahu me'atvu v'havim me'peres, is whiskey or something like that, is not considered one of the 7 liquids. V'af ha'im hayein shaf mozuku b'mayim, even if it is diluted and you've added water to it, mikol makom mu'at to it, the water that you've added is only a small amount. Ve'ein tzarech netilah. Ad kan l'sheinei. Mashma mized im hamayim hu haroiv. The implication is from this, but if the water was the roiv, or lefi hagradin, I'm not sure what that is, to ma'id chazak, okay, a very strong wine, have a bichlal mashka, then it would be mashka. Va'afilu halekach upachas mikazayis gamkein ein lahaka, then you will be makel even if the lekach, the cake, is less than the kazayis, or kamesh kosavnu le'el v'mishnah brura sif katan chaf. Okay, good. Vov hasheisa. Now, so we were talking about the halachas of Netilas Yadayim. Says the Mechaber in Sivov, Hasheisa ein sorach litla afilu yodei achas. When it comes to drinking, Chazal will never masak in Netilas Yadayim. Even if you're going to just drink, even yodei achas, the hand which you hold the cup with. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chav Zayin, Hasheisa delay ovid denoga biyodei b'mashkin shebetei chakli. Because again, you're not going to. The whole concern we said yesterday was shrach truma, that the kohanim would touch the truma and they could be metamed with, if it's wet, etc., or stam, and therefore they would have stam yodayim sheni, and therefore for truma it would make the truma it would become tomei. However, or apostle. But and Chazal extended that to any time you eat bread, which is the mainstay. So that's one of the two reasons why we wash for bread. One is shrach truma, and one is because it's based on the pasuk. But for drinking, Chazal will never made this, because you're never going to touch the liquid. You drink with a case, with a glass, or whatever it is. Even if it happens that the liquid does touch your hand, for example, you put your hand in a river and you drink from there, because Chazal will never masak in netilas yadayim for drinking. So even if you happen to use your hand, you would not need to wash netilas yadayim. Okay, Zayin. If you did wash your hands for an item that is dipped into liquid, one of the 7 liquids, and then you decide, your apple was so delicious, you're going to have a sandwich. That natila, which you were doing for a dover, which is tibul v'mashka, does not count or cannot count for washing for bread. And of course, in if you just happen to wash your hands and then you say, hey, you know what, you think to yourself, I'll have a slice of bread, but you didn't wash your hands in order for that netilas yadayim does not count. So now let's do the Mishnah Berurah on that before we do the Ramah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Katan Chavches, Yesh mi v'hainu. L'das mixas hapoiskim shezochayt le'el, boischav, she'esvur lehu de'ein chiv netila letibul mashke bezman hazeh. Because there are some poskim who say that nowadays there is no obligation to wash your hands if you rinse some fruit or things like that in water. Therefore, that washing, even though you did it for halachic purposes, that's not considered a sufficiently good natila for achilas pas. Because you didn't do a natila which is obligatory in halacha, therefore it would not count. And kol shekain, if you just happen to wash your hands without any kavana, then it won't help. Says Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Chavtes, your hands happen to be wet or dirty, and then you do netilas yadayim, and you had no intention to eat bread, and then you change your mind, there was no hesach hadas, because the netila was not for religious purposes, let's say. Says the Ramah, if you weren't misiach das, then you should wash again, but without a bracha. If a person touched parts of the body which are normally covered, you're in the middle of a meal and you touch part of the body which is normally covered, you should go out and wash your hands again. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Lamed. This words of the Ramah, Koi al kol has seif. It's going on the entire seif. Lamed Aleph lo siach daitei. To im siach daitei mishmirosam, because if a person was misiach das, lekula alma tzorich little changes bebracha to oz ein natila rishayna oile klab, because then you've lost your original natila. Below bracha, the kama poiskim sirilahu to be netilas yadayim lechulin, for washing your hands, not for truma, but for chulin, like we all do nowadays. Because there are many poskim who say that if you wash your hands for netilas yadayim, but MS, you even without kavana, you are yotzer. So long as you've washed your hands and then you want to go and have some bread or whatever, then that would suffice. So Yud Gimel, Ayin Shom. So Mr. will get there. Vimkein Yitzil below bracha, and therefore the answer would be to wash without a bracha. Shem Yos b'netila rishona, because maybe you're still yaitza with the original netila. But netila rishona lo shaykh levorach after nimlach lechol samach memamish netila kimish lo'os l'shem netila, and therefore you would make a bracha the second time around. Im noga hainu af bedova shetibul b'mashka. That if you, even if for that natila, if you were mafsik, you touched a part of the body which is normally covered, to re-wash. Okay, ches. Misha hoya midbar. Someone found himself in a midbar. Ay b'makom sakana ve'ein lo mayim parta min netilas yadayim. Very useful halacha to know that you're in a situation where you have, there is no water whatsoever. Parta min netilas yadayim, says in the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Daled midbar. Who gam kein hatam mipnei sakana. You're in the midbar. That is sakana. So why does it single out midbar? That's just an example of sakana. So the answer is who gam kein hatam mipnei sakana im yelech v'yichapes achamayim v'nokat b'midbar. And to go, the Chazal don't require you to go look for water. V'nokat midbar mipnei atzmai lashmina the stam midbar lo'ile mokum sakanahu, to teach us that the stam midbar is a mokum sakana. Ve'ein lo mayim. Now, va'af k'sheyodeh she'im yachzah achareihem mil yasik shamayim. You might say to yourself, well, look, if I search long enough, and a mill is not that far, it's 18 minutes, I'll get to some water. Gamkin ein mechuyev. So if you're in a midbar or in a place of where of danger in any way, you're not mechuyev to go wash in Tilis Yadayim. So part of in Tilis Yadayim says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Vav. Mikol makom b'mapa tzarich lichrech yadav. So Mr. Shem will get to this halacha, but there is a concept of wrapping your hands in a material of some sort, and that's sort of as a second best if there is no water available, and you don't actually touch the food itself, because that was the whole issue, if you remember. It's srach truma. We wash it to this time. The key reason is because of srach truma, because back in the day the kohanim, if their hands are askonius, that means yadayim shniyim, and if they touch truma, that could puzzle the truma. So the kohanim would have to wash their hands. So to encourage kohanim to do it, it's an amazing thing. Chazal v'Masakein, that everyone, even Leviim, Yisraelim, 90%, the rest of the other 90% of Klal Yisrael, 95%, whatever it is, they have to wash their hands every time they eat bread, just to encourage kohanim to do it when it comes to truma. Because l'maisa, if I touch my sandwich, if I touch my challah tonight, then it's not matama, even my hands are thing, because a sheni cannot make a chulin shlishi. So why do we do it? Because of srach truma. It's an interesting thing. So therefore, if you a second best, you're in a difficult situation. If you have it's covered, you're not actually touching the bread, then that is a suggestion. When exactly we can use that, will the Meshach come to. Okay, so back to Lamed Vav. Even in a mokum sakana, if you can wrap the food in some sort of material, that you should do that. Okay. Test. No Mishnah Berurah on this, but let's do test. One has to be very careful with the halachas of netilas yadayim. Shekala mezalzel b'netilas yadayim chayev nidui. Very strong words. Someone who is mezalzel, he's sort of flippant with netilas yadayim. He's chayev nidui. He really should be excommunicated. Ubole de anius, and he can come to poverty. V'ner come in olam, and he'll be sort of detached from the world. So one should be very careful with netilas yadayim. Yud afal pi sheshiurim b'revius. Pirush Revius Halug Dahainu Shir Beitz V'Chetzi Yosef Litzos B'Shefa. In other words, how much water do you have to use to Netilas Yadayim? The answer is that Me'ikar Din, you only do Revius. Revius is not very much. Imagine your Kiddush Becher tonight, about a third of that, or half of that, whatever, is approximately, I don't know your Kiddush Bechers, but that's Revius. So that's a very small amount. So Afal Pi, says the Mechaber, Sheshiurim B'Revius, Pirush Revius Halug Dahainu Shir Beitz V'Chetzi, 1.5 sizes of an egg. Yosef Litol B'Shefa. If you can, wash B'Shefa with abundance, with a full case, with a lot of water. Why? The Omer Rav Chisda says, the Gemara says, Ana Mashoi Meloi Chofni Maya. I wash my hands with a full hand, with all my hands fully. V'Yavu Molei Chofni Tivus. And I was given a full hand of goodness, of wealth, and therefore one should try and wash with a full hand. Says the Mishnah Berurah, they tell the story with one should be careful with that. Nowadays you should wash with a full hand. You've got a keli, a sink. There's no real reason not to. They tell a meister, Bishral Salanta, he once came to visit a town, and everyone wanted to wash him to watch him wash into this time. How does he do it? And famously, he washed, but only till the knuckles from there. And everyone was very surprised. It's a Mefurish Shulchan Orach. The Gemara says that you should wash with bounty, and he explained because the poor lady, the almona, has to go bring the water from the well, so I don't want to be frum on her cheshbon. Right, so we should bear that in mind as well. Baruch Hashem, nowadays we don't have wells, we have taps, and it's much easier to fulfill this halacha. Okay, says Mishnah Berurah Lamed Zayin, Sheshiurim b'revius, because me'ikar din you only need to wash your hands b'revius. Haim the revius achas l'shtei yodov. Now that's amazing. That's one revius for two hands. V'lekama b'siman kuf samach beis siftalad he'etakti divrei achronim shekosvu d'loyichres me'revius l'kol yad v'yad. Actually, there are the achronim say that you need a revius for each hand. Okay, still a very small amount. Because when you wash with less than that, and therefore, if you're washing with one revius on two hands, it's going to be very tricky how you actually do that. So, other achronim say it's on l'chol yad v'yad. Okay, mole chofno tivusa. So Rav Chisda says, I would wash my hands with a full hand, so that I would get a full hand of goodness. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Ches, mole chofne tivusa, mikol makom lechatchila tov yoseh shleasa b'shvil zeh. But don't do it for that reason. Don't wash your hands so that you're going to get blessing and wealth and who knows what. To who? Al manas lekabel pras, because we don't do things in order to receive rewards. Eliyaseh hakol lekvoit Hashem, we do it l'shem Shemaim, l'shem Hashem Yisbarach, v'aschar memeli yavo, and the reward will come, but do it for the right reasons, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says this is the halacha. U'mishe zohib b'zeh ve'einu misasher. What about a guy? The old question. He's washing. He's very makpid on netilas yadayim, and he's not enjoying good finances. Okay, so there are other factors. That's not the single bullet. There's lots of reasons, and it could be other factors which are causing him not to be misasher. Okay, we'll leave it there. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.